Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Carter DeLoro. I'm from New York City. I went to Pomona College for undergrad, and I worked in admissions at Pomona and Occidental. I've been a school-based counselor across New England and the Midwest, and I'm currently the co-director of college counseling at the Marymount School of New York.
Hi, I'm Lisa, a clinical psychologist and a college counselor and a co-author of the book, The Calm College Method. I have one daughter who's graduated from college, one daughter who's about to go to college, and a son who's about to go to high school.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you, as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. This week in the news, start out with a conversation with Carters. We discuss what's going on with our juniors and what's going on with our senior students who we're working with right now. And then we have a brand new interview, and I think you're really going to like it. Lisa interviews Suzanne Hanna, and Suzanne specializes in helping girls to successfully transition to college. So they're going to be talking about tips on how to successfully transition to college, as well as some really good parenting tips as well if you've got a girl. It's a three-parter, and you'll hear part 1 of 3. And then Kevin Newton is back, and we're talking about grad school admissions overseas. What are the opportunities available if you want to go to college overseas for a graduate degree? That's also a three-parter, and you'll hear part 1 of 3. Before we dive into today's episode, I just want to say a couple more words about a topic I addressed on Monday's episode, and that is the growth of early decision in the public school space. Well, let me start by saying I'm recording this for you guys right now at 2:23 on Wednesday, May 6th. Well, 2 hours ago, I was having a lengthy conversation with the flagship school, and one of the things that came up was the growth of early decision and how it is inevitable that more and more colleges on the public space are going there. Many of them are fighting it. They're holding back. They're pushing back, but it is inevitable. But the main reason why I wanted to bring this up, if you heard that discussion, I talked about 6 states. 6 states now have at least one public college that has early decision. I talked about Virginia. I talked about Miami of Ohio. I talked about Connecticut. I talked about Vermont. I talked about Michigan. And I talked about the most recent one, Florida State. Well, we have many astute listeners. And I got to shout out Louise Larson. She's a counselor out of New Jersey, and she reached out. Loved that segment. But she said, you missed URI. And I didn't even know that University of Rhode Island went to ED. She said, yeah, it was kind of under the radar. And it happened not too long ago. So there's now 7 states. 7 states. University of Rhode Island added to the list. So, and pay attention to this space, because I will be very surprised if 12 months from now we don't have at least one more. And over the next 3 years, I'll be very surprised if we don't have at least 5 more. But once again, I speculated maybe it'd be Indiana, maybe it'd be Purdue. So clearly I was wrong on that. It was Rhode Island. There's some other schools that I could see doing it. Maybe I'll do another segment another time on the kinds of schools that I see going to early decision in the public space. I think that'd probably be a good one for me to be joined by one of our co-hosts, and we could have that conversation. There's certain criteria that sort of make a school a really good candidate. to add ED. Anyway, enough about this. Let's transition to today's episode.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
Good morning, Carter DeLauro. How are you, my friend?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. So Carter and I are sitting here May 6th. What goes on in your world right now in May 6th in the counseling room in the Upper East Side of Manhattan there?
Yeah, this is actually probably our finally we've hit our slow time, a more relaxed pace. We've got most of the class done. A few students that are still, hoping to come off of a wait list at some point soon. And so we're supporting them as best we can, but mostly focused on getting to know our juniors. So a lot of work with them prepping for the fall. It's really nice. I like this time of year.
Do you think you see similar amount of waitlist activity as, say, 5-10 years ago, or would you say there's more in general?
I would say there's more in general. I think, given that 5 to 10 years ago, I wasn't in the same school or neighborhood, but I think over the years, I've had to continue to recalibrate my expectations for the number of waitlist offers that our students get. And it's anecdotally, it feels a lot higher than it has in past years.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of movement in the big public schools for a while now, right? The UC system, for example, there's lots and lots and lots of movement. And some years, Michigan I've seen a lot of movement in Michigan. A lot of our kids, even that are at Michigan now, got in off waitlist. But it seems like a trend. It's interesting out there. There's certain schools that if you're waitlisted, you really need to be falling in love with the school you're at. I mean, I told a student the other day, they were really waiting on a school that they had ED to and got deferred and then got waitlisted. And they were in a school that most people would be dying to go to. And I said, how you doing? And I'm just waiting on my waitlist school. And, and I said to them, I want you to shift your mentality because there's a slim chance that's going to happen. Yeah. And you're not able to fully enjoy the school that you're in. Trust me, if it happens, you'll be able to adjust back and fully have the emotion, the jubilation that you want to experience. But what you're doing now is you're preventing yourself from enjoying and embracing where you're at. Do you find yourself having that kind of conversation with students?
Absolutely. Yeah. And everybody kind of navigates that scenario differently. I think to your point earlier, there are schools, I think, that are now, as opposed to 5 to 10 years ago, kind of baking in the idea that they're going to go to the wait list when they are constructing their initial admit offers. Yep. And 20 years ago, going to the wait list was seen as a sign of weakness. Yes. And now I think any smart, strategic, savvy institution is expecting to go to the wait list. The tricky thing is that even when that happens, they might not. Sure. And we've had colleges here where I initially was hearing that they were expecting to go to the wait list, but that was a month ago, and now they may come back and say, oh, actually we did better than we thought on our initial enrollments, and we're good now. And then you get other institutions where it's the opposite. So it is just hard to predict, and I think it makes a lot of sense for students and families to really fall in love with what the bird they have in hand, as it were.
One of the things that can happen with waitlists, and especially for people that have had a high level of success in their career, is like, I'm not taking no for an answer. Like, I'm convinced if I press the right buttons, I can make this work. Would you say the majority of times you've seen that not work or work for highly selectives?
Well, it's hard to say. I think it really depends on, the buttons that each person may have at their disposal to press, and the institutional priorities at the individual school. And something might work one year and it doesn't work the next year and vice versa. It's really hard to say, but I think at the end of the day, um, I'm really focused on the students and helping make sure that the students are able to, you know, arrive at a strong emotion, like healthy emotional place,
Mm-hmm.
to say, my ideal scenario for a student right now
Mm-hmm.
waiting on a wait list would be to really get themselves happy and excited about what they have. And then
Mm-hmm.
if the wait list comes through, it's icing on the cake, even if you're still sort of quote unquote working the wait list and,
Yeah.
writing a wait list letter or whatever else you might be trying to do at the same time. And this can be a tricky thing for grown adults, but at the same time, being able to say, like, I'm going to take what I have also
Mm-hmm.
and really try to look on the bright side of that. And if, a 17 or 18-year-old is able to thread that needle, that's a great life skill that they'll use again in the future.
Yeah, I find myself telling students and parents exactly what you said all the time. I said, I'm going to ask you to do something that's really hard to do. I'm not asking you to give up that dream because you like this other school, but I'm going to ask you to do the things that the school may want you to do. Like, do not go beyond what they want you to do because you're only going to irritate them.
Yeah.
I think showing up at their office increases your chances, and other things that students try.
Yeah.
And that's going to be hard because I want you to emotionally invest, or you can drop it, but that's your decision. But if you do, yeah, it's going to be hard. I want you to embrace what you have, but we can still go through the motions over here. But from my experience, most of the time, people try to pull their strings at the waitlist level for highly selectives. It doesn't work. If that's going to work, it more usually works in the early decision round, earlier on the front end of the process, not late.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say, because at this point, again, you're at the mercy of so many other variables and
Right.
factors, and there's definitely a chance that things kind of break your way.
Yeah.
But the way that I've liked to present it to families is, you're going to need a lot of luck when it comes to getting off of the wait list. You have to hope that the institutional priorities sort of break in such a way that they're going to be looking for a student like you. And
Correct.
then the work that you're doing with your waitlist advocacy is so that if you get lucky and they're looking for someone like you, that you are the one who
Right.
is sort of at the top of their mind there. But it's, there's so little that we can actually control from this side.
Yeah, because they might have over enrolled and they don't even go to the wait list at all. Then you're completely shut out. Or they might say,
Yeah.
you know what, we got absolutely slammed by boys in Wisconsin this year. We never got boys in Wisconsin. So we're gonna go take a look at who we waitlisted at boys in Wisconsin,
Hmm.
for maybe for a particular college. And then we'll look at our internal rating system and see who was just on the cusp of admission, and then
Hmm.
reach out to them. Now, we've talked about ED3 a lot internally, kind of as a thing. Um, you want to explain to people what ED3 is? Because I think, one thing I've come to learn, Carter, and it's a big omission in my thinking. A lot of times I don't cover something because I'm like, we've talked about that a lot before. But
Hmm.
what I've really come to realize is we have so many listeners that have started listening in the last 6 months, nine
Hmm.
months, 3 months. And most of them don't go back to the back catalog. It's only the real zealous ones. So
Yeah.
I sometimes think, well, I don't talk about that. We've talked about that before. But I'm pretty sure when I say ED3, there's a whole bunch of people are like, what the heck is he talking about?
Yeah,
Um,
and just to validate that, before I joined the team as a contributor here, when as a listener,
mhm,
my own listening habits kind of ebbed and flowed with my work schedule. So in
sure.
October, when I'm slammed with writing letters, I'm
Yeah.
not listening to very many podcasts at all.
Yeah.
So I can see people missing things. When you talk about ED3, my read and understanding of that is sort of coming out and saying, like, I'm going to commit if given the opportunity. Is that's what you're saying?
Yeah. I'm talking a lot about how schools, like they build wait list into their strategy. So one of the things colleges like, they don't like to swing and miss, especially selective colleges, right? Because the
Mhm.
people are looking at yields and they want to keep their admit rate low. And so you can, one way around that, one tool is ED1, one tool is ED2. Another tool is waitlisting kids and then put feelers out to see who's going to come. And if they don't come, they never show up in the numbers as a swing and a miss.
Yeah.
And so there's been obviously like a rise in that.
Yeah. And I would say also the schools that are maybe a little bit further down the selectivity food chain, but are still, extremely selective schools that track demonstrated interest. I regularly see students who have not expressed enough demonstrated interest that end up getting a defer or a wait list. And then that's the time when they could step forward and say, actually, I am really interested. Sorry, I didn't do that before. And at that point, then the college might be able to say, oh, well, if all of a sudden the chances of yielding the student have risen dramatically, we're going to take them off of the wait list.
Yeah. Last question on this. Another thing that happens in the spring, and this has been happening forever, this happened ever since I've been doing admissions. You have your fall travel season where you go out, and it depends how school to school. I mean, some people are on the road for, 8-10 weeks, some 6 weeks, but they're hitting it hard. Some of them like right after Labor. Anyway, somewhere from September up to that Thanksgiving period, right? You're
Mhm.
traveling. You're out there, you're doing fairs, you're doing school visits, you're doing receptions, you're doing the whole thing, working your territory. But then there's another, let's go back out in the spring. There's that little time where the class is mostly wound down and schools are still open. We haven't hit summer yet. So there's the whole spring fair season. I love travel
Yeah.
when I was in admissions. So I love going back out in the spring. I loved it. And so have you seen any of that stuff start to pop up yet? Like schools starting to hit that May, because May is the big month for that.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually, we're part of a group of independent schools in New York City that hosts a college fair for our 6 schools in the last week of April. And that's really in the early stages of what New York City independent schools would think of as Fair Week. Everybody's got their fairs. A bunch of reps come out. Our fair had 160 colleges roughly represented, and
What's the date on that, Carter?
the date. So ours is always the last Monday in April, and that week is just all the big independent schools have fairs here, and so then you see the New York City Department of Education set up a college fair, and all the reps descend on the city and try to talk to as many kids as possible, and I really have seen, I think, April and May for juniors be a much more important and vital recruitment time for us here in New
Mm,
York City than I've been accustomed to in the past at other institutions, and think that the students and families are coming to this process earlier and earlier, and so
mhm.
it makes sense for the colleges to want to get out there a little bit ahead of senior fall.
And that's not just a New York City thing. That's a national trend because my student body's national,
Yeah,
and
yeah. I assumed I didn't want to jump to conclusions on that.
yeah, people are starting this process earlier all the time, and we had to change our plans that we offered and adjust them because people start earlier than they did before.
Yeah.
They just do. Yeah. So I'll say this. Going back to the fact we get new listeners all the time. I thought Hillary did an outstanding segment with me probably about a year ago on how to take advantage of it. It was called Do's and Don'ts of a College Fair. We went through the
Mm.
do's and went through the don'ts. I thought it was really good. So for listeners, especially now the way the new website's set up, now that we have the topics and the explore categories, it's so much easier to find past episodes. If you go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, just put in college fairs, probably would show up both under Explorer topics. You'll find the segment that Hillary did. Sometimes when we do a segment, I think it's so salient, I will actually put it into the interview rubric on the podcast, so it is also under interviews as well.
Great.
But check that out. There's some great do's and don'ts to maximize a college fair. Friends, you may have noticed Carter used the term institutional priorities 2 different times. This is such a common term in admissions because, quite frankly, institutional priorities govern, frame, and guide all admissions decisions. In fact, it's so common that it's oftentimes referred to as IPs. Now, part of that is because you're going to be using the term institutional priorities a lot, and it's a mouthful. That's 9 syllables. So who wants to use 9 syllables all the time? You can just use 2, IP. Now, a lot of times, friends, when I talk to students and parents about IPs, the reaction I get ranges anywhere from IPs are silly. And this is more unspoken than spoken. Sometimes it's spoken. 2, IPs aren't fair. So anytime something's confusing, my first thought is, can I come up with an analogy? Because a picture's always worth 1,000 words. So I want to give you another framework to think about when you think of IPs. Let's say you own a restaurant, Harry's Restaurant. It's open from 11 a.m. till 11 p.m. And you love your restaurant. However, you've got a problem. You're short 6 waiters or waitresses. So you run an ad. You get 50 applications. And you know what? Of those 50, 40 of them look perfectly capable of doing the job, perfectly qualified. The problem is you're really short on people who are available from the 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift or the 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift. In other words, opening and closing. And some of the best applicants that you get can only work from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. But you're not only fully staffed from 2 to 8 p.m. If anything, you might have 2 or 3 more servers than you actually need from 2 to 8 p.m. So which servers are you going to hire? Of course, you're going to hire the ones that are also qualified, but they can work from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. or from 8 p.m. till 11 p.m. because that is where you have a need. Colleges admit students that meet their needs. So the next time you hear the word institutional priorities or IPs, think of this waiter rate to shortage analogy. Many kids get in because they meet the needs of a college, and many other equally qualified applicants are like the waiter and the waitress that can't work at the time the boss needs them. Perfectly qualified, but they don't meet the need of the restaurant, or the student doesn't meet the need of the college. All right, friends, let's transition to Lisa's brand new interview with Suzanne Hanna.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, it's time for Lisa's interview with Suzanne Hanna. In part 1, Suzanne is a life coach for girls, and she gives her backstory. Then Suzanne tells us what a life coach does for girls and what it actually consists of the work. Suzanne talks about the types of struggles girls face in college. Suzanne has some words of wisdom about small talk. Suzanne talks about the value of repetition. Suzanne gives some academic tips for girls to be academically successful. And then Suzanne gives some excellent tips about homesickness. Listen and enjoy.
Hi, this is Lisa. I am one of the co-hosts on Your College Bound Kid, and I'm thrilled to be here today to talk to Suzanne Hanna. And Suzanne Hanna is a life coach for college girls, and we're going to talk about some of the adjustments that girls go through from going from high school going to college. She originally was a high school assistant principal. Before that, she was an English teacher. And spending all that time with teens really helped Suzanne know how to talk to teens and what kind of issues they might be facing. So, Suzanne, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to doing what you're doing.
Okay. It's been a fun road. So I started my career in education as an English teacher, and I taught high school English for 5 years, and kind of moved up pretty quickly. I got a second master's in administration and got a job I probably shouldn't have gotten in my late 20s at central office working as the secondary English like district director for English language arts. And so that job really put me, I was like boots on the ground in schools, and this put me at central office where I could see the big picture and see how schools ran, which ended up being invaluable for understanding teaching and learning, because I'm very fascinated with how kids learn and what we can do to better prepare our teachers to teach our kids. And so from there, I realized I loved school, and I became an assistant principal at a middle school assistant principalships. It was fun. But very quickly, my principal was moved over to a high school, and he and I went over to that high school with him to be an assistant principal. So since then, I've stayed in high schools, and I did one last stint at a middle school. And so during that time, I was in a very big high school when COVID hit and lockdown hit, and it gave us a lot of time in an empty school, which is a very creepy place when there aren't the kids in there. And it just felt empty, and it felt my heart just ached seeing these all these walls and chairs with no children in there. The energy was gone, and there was such a shift in how kids acted upon return after lockdown, and there was such a deep-seated anxiety that I saw in our kids that broke my heart, and I started to become really intrigued in how we can better serve our kids, considering their mental health and the mental health crisis we were in with the pandemic. And I talked to the school social worker, the psychologists, the counselors, and I'm like, guys, what can we do to better serve these kids? And they agreed that there's like this chasm in support. And so I just started wondering, like, how can I, move my career into a direction where I can help kids? Because, I love teaching and learning. I love that, but I've done it for 25 years, and I want to do something different where I can meet with girls one-on-one and teach them that they can trust themselves, and that this is how you can manage your anxiety, and what you're dealing with, or your response to what you're dealing with is normal. It's okay, sweetie. Nothing's wrong with you. Like, that's just what I needed to say to girls. And so I honestly kind of made up this job because I started researching support for college and teen girls. And there's, of course, like formal support, and there's college admission support. But there's even like this whole big field of sorority recruitment support. But I didn't see a life coaching kind of position where I could work with girls. And so I just started it. I was like, let's do Suzanne Hanna coaching. Let's start meeting with girls one-on-one. And it's just turned into the greatest thing I've ever done. It's been so rewarding and fun. And these girls just fill my cup every day. They're so much fun. And it's so great to support them and help them understand, like I said before, that they can trust themselves. And they're killing it. Like they just need an adult. They need an adult to talk to them, because there are no adults on the college campus. They just have their peers. And sometimes that's not like the greatest place to get advice.
Mm-hmm. So what is personal coaching like? Like, what does it consist of?
Okay, it's one-on-one. We talk via Zoom. Some of my girls like to just throw in our AirPods and take a walk and talk. And so it's just, you get me for 45 minutes or an hour, and we talk about everything. The girls know that our conversation's completely confidential. I will never shame or judge them. And a lot of times they need my help in making like decisions, or maybe something happened and they're not sure how to manage it. And I help girls with studying and managing the academic expectations of college, because they are incredibly different than high school. And having a 4.5 GPA in high school does not mean that it's going to be easy when you get to college. And a lot of times those are the girls that struggle the most, because they went from this high level of support and a different kind of instruction to having to learn how to teach themselves. And it's something they can learn very quickly. And when they do, like, they're killing it, right? They get it. But it's something they have to learn to teach themselves, which they don't want to hear they have to do that, but that's part of the process, that they learn and then they get empowered. So we meet once a week, and it depends on what package parents and their daughters like to purchase. And I have subscriptions. I have a lot of girls that have never left me. We've had our initial packages, and they have a subscription, and I see them a few times a month, and I love them. They're like my kids. So that's how it works out.
That's great. And I think it really did fill kind of a void of support for young women that society really wasn't addressing.
Yeah.
So, what kind of issues do you see college girls facing right now? Now, I know you mentioned academics, right? That's a new challenge. What other kinds of issues do they tend to struggle with?
Certainly social and making friends. Making friends now is, it's always been difficult to make friends, but I think it's even more difficult now with social media, and girls, get stuck in a comparison loop where they see these big groups of Instagram friends and all the girls have the same like dress length and shoes and they're all like leaned back and now they got their arms straight up in the air and they're smiling like they're the best friends that they've ever met, the best friends that ever best friended is what we call it. And but then the picture's taken and the group disbands because you can't have 15 best friends. That just does not work. I mean, maybe for some people it does. I've never seen it work successfully. But girls, with that, they scroll on their phones and they see these huge groups and they think that they're best friends and they want to be that and they do everything they can to try to like be part of these groups. And I think the big secret is those groups are just for posting and the real friendships are with 3 to 5 really close people. But I think there's a journey to understanding that this is what it looks like versus this is what real friendship really is. And I think that's a really big challenge for girls. And once they start to figure that out and kind of see through the facade, they understand that like the true friendships and relationships they probably already have are enough for them and fulfill them. And I think too, making friends in a new place when you've grown up with people who are, grouped together in high school. Like no matter how large your high school is, academically you're kind of tracked and you're with the same people and 3 to 4 classes every day, almost your whole career K-12. And so you make friends just by proximity and just by, just closeness. And so I think kids don't understand that when they get to college, you don't have that automatic group. Like you don't walk into a room and automatically know 7 people in there. It doesn't occur to them that's going to happen because they're thinking about the big stuff in college and the fun things and the day-to-day like realities of this is going to feel uncomfortable for a bit are very important for girls to know before they head to their campuses. Like you're going to be uncomfortable and that's okay. It's not going to kill you, I promise. We're not going to let it kill you. Not today, right? We're not doing it. You're tough and you can do this. And once you recognize that you're uncomfortable, but you can be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like I recognize that I am uncomfortable right now. I just walked into a big lecture hall with 300 people. I know 0 of those 300 people, but I'm a little uncomfortable, but I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to go sit down and do my work and talk to the person next to me. Small talk is something we have to learn how to do. Gen Z hates small talk. And I'm like, well, that's how everything starts. Like we got to do it. We got to do it, people. And I always tell my girls, I'm like, be like an old lady like me. Just say it's hot. Talk about the weather. Like break the ice and learn to make friends that way because small talk is how relationships begin. But I think making friends is the number one fear. And then I think once like the academic hammer drops, it's the understanding that your schedule is your responsibility and how you spend your day and your time is up to you now.
Yeah, you made a comment to me in our pre-meeting that you have to handle a piece of information, I think 7 times before
Yeah.
you remember it. And so I've been telling my kids that, and they at first were very grumpy about it, but
Yes.
grudgingly have had to admit that that is actually the case.
Oh, we have a study now. Does this count as an unofficial study?
Yeah, they're an N of 2. But I do think that they don't have any idea how to structure these kinds of classes where you have to do a lot of reading.
Yep.
I think I read something that many teens haven't read a full book in a very long time.
They haven't.
So,
They haven't.
and here they get assigned all this stuff and they have to read it and they have to understand it and they have to use it. So, what kind of other tips do you give for studying?
Well, I think before I give like the tips, I make sure the kids understand their responsibility of moving information from long term or from short term to long term memory. Because in high school, their teachers do it for them. In high school, their teachers have learning down to a science and they present the students, they had things written on the whiteboard and then they have notes and then they do group projects and they're tested and the academic vocabulary is repeated over and over. So it automatically goes to long-term memory just from sitting in class and paying attention. And so that's why school comes very easily to a lot of kids, because their brains are given ample opportunity to learn the material. And then so kids get to college, and a lot of times they never are even told what they need to know out loud. Like a lot of times the lectures don't even really connect with the readings. But when they get the tests and assessments, they realize that what was in the readings is also on the test. And they're like, but the professor didn't say it. And I'm like, I know, because they're not. And when you see like chapter 1 on August 19th on your syllabus, that means you read chapter 1 before August, whatever date I said. And you have to like that, you're responsible for that, understanding it, learning it, reading it. And then what your professor tells you in the lecture is like a bonus prize. Like you learned like the intricacies of the material, or they expand in something that was just introduced in the reading. And so it's a new ball game with that regard. And once kids realize that it's their responsibility to give themselves this exposure to material at least 7 times. I did a lot of research trying to figure out like how to raise our test scores at a high school where I worked, and how to integrate literacy into every single course, not just English class. And so we adopted this whole literacy approach with academic vocabulary, and telling teachers in every subject area, PE to nutrition classes to like chemistry, students have to have exposure to these academic vocabulary words at least 7 times in order to know them. And so when all the teachers got on board and started integrating this vocabulary daily into lessons many times, and ironically, actually not ironically, what's so beautiful is like the PE and health teachers did it the best. They got the most creative with how to teach vocab. It was so much fun. But they realized that this exposure is what connects the kids' brains to the material, and they understand. They're like, oh. And then what's really cool is when you think about like that exposure, it starts to transcend subject areas, and kids will be like, I just learned that in social studies. And we're like, well, guess what? This is called the English language, and we all say the same words, and things cross over. Like, guess what? We're telling them. Anyway, and so that's where that 7 times came from. I just wanted to kind of give a little background to that, like I didn't make it up. And so and then I think too, the other big piece, I have the Smart Girl Study System, and the other big piece of it is understanding this daily study flow that helps you dive into what you just learned and take ownership of it. And so I give the kids in my Smart Girl Study System, I tell them like in a matrix what you do when you leave your class. You don't go back to your room. We're not doing that. Like you got to find your spot. I teach them how to find a special spot where they can stay focused and not be distracted and lock in. And then you basically open your notes and your materials, and you go through the flow, and you reconnect with things. You take notes, you answer questions that you have or that you want to ask your professor. And kids sometimes are really annoyed that they have to do that because it's extra work. But after they do it for a few classes, I tell them the number one thing you look for is where you made mistakes in your note taking. Because when you've been to a lecture, you've listened. And so this information is like in this like little fishbowl in your head, in your short-term memory fishbowl. Like the stuff's still there and it's retrievable. And so when you sit down after class and you go through your notes and you're like, oh, I thought he said the X goes here in this equation, but actually it's here. You remember because it's in your fishbowl, and you fix your notes. Because if you don't fix your notes 2 weeks from then when you go to study for a test, they're incorrect and you learn incorrectly. And we all know once you learn something incorrectly, it is so hard to unwind that and redo it. So that's kind of the premise of understanding the academic load, is that understand how your brain learns and take responsibility for it. And then here is a way to actually integrate this daily into your schedule to where you don't have to cram, and you can take control. And once kids realize they can do it, it's beautiful because they become successful, and because they're totally capable. They just don't. There's no bridge between high school and college. Yeah. There's no explanation as to how these are the steps you take. And I just saw that emptiness, and I was like, wait, this is not fair to our kids, because they work so hard. They work so hard to get admitted, and then they get there and they're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think what you point out in both with the friendship issue and the study skills issue. It's like expectations of college versus the reality. And like kids have expectations that they're going to go to school and they're going to have 15 best friends who I guess have the same shoes or whatever. Um, and they're going to just, be able to ace everything, because that's how it was before. And then when they hit the reality is often very, very different. And so what you're doing is you're helping them with that reality,
Absolutely.
that nobody really talks about.
Nobody does. And parents are like, you're going to meet your bridesmaids. And it was the best 4 years of my life. And I'm like, please, God, stop with these poor kids. Like they go in, like you said, with these high expectations and they're so disappointed that they don't have like instant friends. And they're so upset that like they feel like they don't fit in and they feel really lonely those first few weeks, which is totally normal. Homesickness is part of life. And it's something that you're not only going to feel that first week of college, like, and I've explained to my girls that like homesickness equals love. Like that means you love your home and where you come from, and there's no shame in that. That's beautiful. Loving your people and where you come from is the most beautiful thing in the world. And you can carry that missing of them along with doing what you need to do to get into a routine in college and learning to make friends and learning to go to class and building your life. Like you can carry both of those things at one time. And I think, reducing the shame around homesickness. I've seen a lot of like success with kids with just reducing the shame
Mhm.
because they're not kind to each other. Like if somebody's homesick on a dorm hallway, they're like, "Oh, she's the homesick one," and I'm like, "You were too." This is not like,
Right. Yeah. I think that's so interesting just to try to get them to recognize that it's going to be hard and you're not going to like all the things and you do
yeah.
have to be uncomfortable, and that's welcome to adulthood.
Well,
you know
welcome. Oh, welcome.
yeah. And I think that parents have, you mentioned the, best 4 years of my life, bridesmaids, meeting kind of things. But I think parents have like really maybe unrealistic expectations too about what it's going to be like for their girls to go to college and what their role is going to be and how they're going to feel about it. And, one of the things I think you mentioned is that like, there's like a thing that happens, maybe spring of senior year with your senior that is not pleasant. And I know this morning it was like 7 a.m. and I was already telling my husband, I don't know if she's gonna make it to graduation. Just like the level of conflict just explodes over
Oh,
nothing. And like in 2 seconds over do you have your shoes or whatever, question. It's crazy. So talk to us about that and talk to me about that, please. And what do I do about that?
so hard. Seniors are interesting creatures because they have been through, since kindergarten. It's like their 13th year of having their lives just laid out for them. And it doesn't even like, I'm not even accusing like any kind of helicopter parenting. That's just the school model that you go to school, from August to June every year, and you go again the next August, and it's just this like pattern of behavior. And so once they get admitted to schools and they finally commit, good grief, what a ridiculous process that is now. So they've gone through
Yes.
this whole just like torturous, drawn out process that makes you strung out. And they're so like they're tired and they're living on the fence. They have one foot at home, but then now they have one foot on this college campus in a place that they've maybe visited a couple of times. They've just heard things about it. They've researched online. They've looked at social media. They don't know, but their brains are starting to live there, and so they're terrified. And so there's this deep rooted fear in all these seniors' eyes. I see it. Like I used to see it every year, and I would just like go talk to them in the hall and like help them understand. And parents would come to me and they're like, Suzanne, my straight A daughter. Like they would show up Monday mornings when I'd always have parents like in the office, like, talk to me. And they're like, my straight A daughter, she just snuck out and she came home and she'd been drinking. And what is happening? And I'm like, that's normal. And they're like, what's happening? She used to be perfect. And I'm like, she's don't call her that, number one. But she's normal and she's scared and she's rebelling. And so like I have these like personas that I say seniors have. And one of the personas is like the rebel. Well, you have the kid that never has done anything wrong, and suddenly they come home with like a piercing, and you're like, oh, okay. Or tattoos. And I'm like, but that's what happens. And it's very upsetting to parents because rebellious teenage behavior can be incredibly dangerous. And so as a parent, it's so hard to see this happen with a kid that you've never really had to worry about in that regard.
Friends, this concludes part 1 of Lisa's interview with Suzanne Hanna. Hope you join us next week for part 2 of 3. Okay, friends, let's transition to our college spotlight of the day. It's a 3-parter, and you'll hear part 1 of 3, a conversation I had with Kevin about going outside the country for grad school.
And now it's time for our college spotlight of the week.
Kevin Newton, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me back. It's been a minute.
Yeah, but based on our survey response, man, you're really adding a lot of value. Had a lot of people that said they loved when you came on, so we're happy to have you back.
Well, I'm always happy to be here.
And friends, Kevin and I were going back about all kinds of different topics. What should we cover? And he suggested something, and I was like, bingo, winner, chicken dinner. And so Kev suggested, he's like, we haven't really talked about going overseas for grad schools, especially master's programs. As soon as he said it, I'm like, game on. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And Kev, I want you to just start out and just take it wherever you want to go.
No, it's one of my favorite topics. It's really, from a personal note, it's how I got into
That's true.
exposure to European universities, and I think that when you do the pros and cons of, going overseas for university, there's a lot of nuance there.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to look at it from a graduate school perspective, and I could be very biased on this, I almost assuredly am, the pros really start to stack up, especially if you're looking for a master's degree, especially if you're looking in Europe. And the costs are often a lot lower. You can complete them in a year. There are some 2-year master's degrees, and we'll talk a little bit about those. There's a little bit of tricky terminology, but just, I think that especially, and I'm just going to come out and say this, if you're looking at and this could be my own bias leaking in, but I'm just going to come out and say, if you're looking at something like the Tufts Fletcher School of Diplomacy or, SICE at Johns Hopkins or something like that, not to be super specific, but if you're looking at a master's degree in an international relations field, you should absolutely be looking for any number of reasons at university or at graduate school programs in Europe.
So I got to stop you for a sec. So Dave Williams was co-host forever for us. And other than my brother, my best friend, his daughter graduated from Yale. And she went and got a master's at LSE in international relations, international affairs, some specialized name in that realm. And then she's doing a second component. There's like 2 1-year different master's programs that are, similar type fields. So she's over there for 2 years. So she's an example of somebody doing exactly what you said. And our longtime listeners will know, Dave, I still get questions about him from time to time he was really on a podcast for 3.5 solid years.
No, it's something I see a lot of people doing are stacking master's degrees because you can do.
He's doing.
Do 2 and kind of one that gives you breadth, one that gives you depth, and there are also just to dive on in, and there are different kinds of master's degrees, and something you're.
Hey, Kev, before you get into all that,
sure.
I think it'd be interesting for you to kind of talk to us more about your journey, particularly on the master's point. So, talk about when you first said, "Hey, I might want to go overseas." You know what I mean? What was it that convinced you it was better than your U.S. options? I think that would be a good place for you to start, and then we can get into the nitty gritty for you speaking to other people. Tell us about your own pilgrimage.
Sure. So, as people may or may not know, I was a history and Middle Eastern studies major at William and Mary. And this was right after the 9/11 attacks. Within a few years, I got into Arabic because my one of my best friends from high school was Moroccan, and just like high school boys do, he was sitting there like, I'm not going to teach you any bad words in my language because I used to have a much more pronounced Southern accent than I do now. He's like, you're just going to mess them up. And I was like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. So, of course, the next semester I signed up for Arabic 101 at William and Mary, and I fell in love with it.
Did you come to William and Mary from Tennessee?
So
or were you in Virginia at the time?
In Florida, my dad worked for public supermarkets as, in their central office. So we moved to Florida the end of my freshman year of high school. And
so you went from Tennessee to Florida to Virginia.
Right.
Okay. All right.
So
cool. Yeah.
It was quite the journey, but I still definitely had that East Tennessee accent. At the time that, I was talking to my buddy at the end of my freshman year of college. I was home and, I'd already kind of figured out that history majors need some skill because coming from a place like William and Mary where writing is so intensive, I wanted something to stand out. And I was like, well, I should learn a language. I think this is one of the most useful things you can do. And so I signed up for Arabic. I fell in love with it. And I had these professors who, were two of them actually went for their PhDs at the place where I would end up going for my master's degree. And Mark, I got
was that the first place that introduced you to, and say the name of the university again?
So the place I went for graduate school, it's a terrible name in American English, but it has no such connotations in British English, is the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. It's, if you're interested in the non-Western world, there's no happier place on earth. And while I was at William and Mary, I got really into, of all things, Islamic law, because I kept hearing people toss around Sharia law this and Sharia law that. And I just thought back to my really good friend from high school who was, Sunni Muslim. And I was like, I can't square this circle. I want to learn more about this, and I want to learn more. And ended up, getting to take Islamic law at William and Mary's Law School junior year. I had an amazing professor, Christy Warren, who worked with my undergrad advisor, Tamara San. And yes, I'm name dropping both of them, and I hope that they hear this because I still think of them very fondly. And they broke a lot of rules to let me take a bunch of law school classes. And
so did you go overseas sight unseen, or did you take a trip? Like, how did all that work?
So I had, my first time out of the country had been the summer between junior and senior years, when I went to Jordan for 2.5 months to kind of immerse myself in Arabic. And I stopped in, my grandparents were very kind and said, well, if you're going to do this, we're going to pay for you to have a couple of days in Rome and a couple of days in Egypt on the way, because I had connections, or connecting flights rather. And I had never stepped foot in London, but I had talked to my professors and they were like, this is the place. They said, Oxford and Cambridge might be the place. You don't have the grades for Oxford and Cambridge. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. But, outside of that, this is the place to do Islamic law. And, I was looking at the American universities and the Canadian universities, and, it would be like you would have to study Middle Eastern studies. And I knew that I wanted to focus just on law, that was what I was interested in. And the only program that came close was actually McGill, that they had multiple Islamic law classes I could take. It's just, it would still be a Middle Eastern studies degree. And I didn't get into McGill because, again, I was rocking a 2.92 GPA by the time I graduated.
Well, good for you. You're able to get in with a 2.92.
Which we will come back to that in a minute. One of the reasons I love graduate schools for European graduate schools. So, there were some hard classes I had to pull with. Arabic, I loved it, but it didn't always love me. So I applied, got in, and my first time in London, I will never forget carrying, because I know that people listening to this can't see this, but Mark, I don't think we've ever done a podcast recording where I don't have like bookshelves upon bookshelves behind me, because
You got books behind you.
There's my wife's law textbooks are back there.
Oh.
But the other side is, like, ironically enough, languages. But I had a suitcase of clothes and a suitcase of books, because I had already accumulated probably 20 books on Islamic law. Spoiler alert, there are only like 30 good ones written in English. So, I was already most of the way there. And I was in this big city. It was the biggest city I'd ever been in. I was at King's Cross tube station, and people stopped to help me with my luggage up the stairs. And I was just like, I know that they're just wanting me to get on with it and get out of their way. But there was just something I was like, okay, people are nice here, but it's not that kind of, dare I say this as a Southerner to another Southerner, that kind of bless your heart niceness that, I may have grown up with a little too much of. So, but yeah,
it's funny because, sometimes you talk to Midwesterners and you'll talk about Midwest nice, and then some Midwesterners will say, you mean Midwest fake nice? And
one of my best friends,
you're saying the same thing about the South.
One of my best friends lives in Grand Rapids, and we are constantly just making fun of each other for it. And it is a whole thing. But no, I did Islamic and Chinese law at SOAS because, again, I knew I was interested in comparative law. That's where I really came into my own as a nerd. The 2.29 GPA disappeared, and I started actually getting good grades for the first time since high school. I should say that trend started senior year of college, but, Arabic and I had reached a détente by that point. I wasn't going to hurt it, and it wasn't going to hurt me too badly. But
so let's take it back to where you are now. So have you, because for those of you who are new to our podcast, Kev specializes in placing students in international universities. He does both master's programs as well as bachelor's programs. He does it all around the world. So he's our international specialist on our podcast. Have you seen a rise of people asking you about grad programs overseas in the last 5 years?
Absolutely. And I think that, it's kind of ironic, because how I got into advising on this was I turned in my master's thesis the day that Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy. So shiny political risk jobs suddenly went away. I worked on an encyclopedia for a while. It was the absolute coolest job I've ever had. Cooler than this.
You are a nerd.
I am. I own it, man. But I came back like all William and Mary alumni do. I spent time in D.C. and all of my friends and friends of friends were asking me how I did this. And, it was, I sort of realized, okay, there are people asking about this. So I started off, when I said, okay, my then girlfriend, now wife, looked at me and said, you can't fight this. People are going to keep bothering you about it. You might as well. She said, you might as well put it in the engagement ring fund. The famous last words, we ended up using her grandmother's ring because nothing I found was good enough. And I thought that only grad students would be interested. And it turned out that, up until very recently, undergrads have been the driving force for my business, but it is something I've found more.
So what's your theory on that? Do you think does some of that have to do with people who aren't sure if they may want to stay in this country and they're in college when they have that thought and they start looking to other places? I would think that would be a portion of it.
That's always a very fun thing, because I have my opinions, and my opinions do not match up with me being, in Dallas, Texas, as a straight cisgendered white dude. And people kind of dance around it. And I'm like, just come out and be blunt. You don't want to be here right now. I get it. Just, that's fine.
Although as you and I would say, that would be Texas, not necessarily Dallas.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. But people, my brother always points out, it's really not red and blue. It's really more cities, suburbs versus rural exurbs, everywhere in the country where you see a lot of the different perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really been a lot of people, I think, are just starting to figure out that even beyond the politics of it, even beyond all of that. So if you're listening to this sometime in the future, the politics have changed. This is still relevant. The cost savings are massive, both in terms of time and finances. A lot of places overseas do take either 529 plans or federal student aid or GI bills. I know we've talked about all those in the past. And when you're looking at the tuition rates, it's a lower tuition rate per year of study, and it's typically only a year long. So
so you're looking at 1 year, lower cost, scholarship potential, because there's scholarships there for master's students, right?
Yeah,
now, I know one thing in the past that's been really good. Is this something you're watching? Is the strength of the dollar? I know that's lately been changing, not so drastically to the point where it would change things, but
that's
is that a factor?
Because I went to grad school when the dollar was $2.10 to the pound, and I think it's in the 130s right now. So I'm still a little bitter over that, but it is something that, and tuition rates have risen and things like that to kind of ameliorate that to some degree. But it's still, you're seeing a lot of opportunities. You're seeing a lot of professional opportunities because for a lot of the same reasons we talk about for undergrads, you still get the work visas afterwards. You get, the opportunity to...
Kev, explain to our listeners the benefit of the work visa.
Right. So every country is different, but typically, whether it's the UK, Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands, you get a 2 to 3 year visa after you graduate by virtue of having graduated from one of their universities. And this is your chance to make inroads in your career, depending on the country, depending on your employer, depending on all sorts of things that my wife would be looking at me very sternly and say, you need to remind everyone you are not an attorney. So I am not an attorney, certainly not in these jurisdictions, but depending on a number of different factors, you can get on the road to permanent residency and even citizenship. So the master's
do you find some people do that strategically? Like, hey, I think I might want to live in London or Paris or pick your place.
Oh, absolutely.
Scotland. And so, hey, I can go over there and use the work visa as a way toward residency/citizenship.
I would say 50% of the graduate students I work with do that because it's again, it's not always the politics of the moment. I'm working with someone right now who, so that I don't provide any identifying information about this individual, she is enamored with the idea of living in a certain European country. She's already quite proficient in the language. She did a minor in it in university, and she's ready to go. She is ready to pursue her graduate studies, if need be, in that language and have a life in that country. And it's something that she has wanted for quite some time. The whole family has bought into the fact that, she is going to be in that country for the foreseeable future. And she has no other connections to that country.
So that intrigues me because most of the time when I have students that inquire about a country, there is a family connection there. Do you find that's the case most of the time?
I would say a fair chunk of the time too. I think
could go either way. Yeah.
You've definitely got students who are leaning more towards it for various and sundry reasons, family connections, but also you've got students like the one I just mentioned who they had a language requirement freshman year of college or in high school to fulfill, and they just kept taking the courses because they enjoyed it and the culture and realized, holy cow, I can actually live here. And this is a path.
Do you get any people that went abroad? They studied abroad as a college student and fell in love with the place?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would make sense to me.
So, in fact, this same student, that is absolutely applicable to her, is that she spent a significant amount of time in this country during her undergrad days and just she's gravitated back towards it. So it tends to happen more with, shall we say, the countries with really good food.
They like the food scene.
Italy and Spain and France. They're your three winners in that regard. it doesn't really happen. And I'm not going to insult anyone's food, but
Sure.
There are certain countries that the food is a big draw, and I can't blame them.
On Monday's episode, take a question from a listener, someone who heard the recent conversation on Standard Strong and says, I'm still just confused by what exactly you mean when you say Standard Strong. So we're going to unpack it. Then you hear part 2 of 3 with Jed Appleruth. Jed is doing a deep dive on the difference between self-prep, group prep, one-on-one prep, and other hybrid models as we discuss which type of student is best for which type of prep and what time is best to take what type of prep. Friends, if you ever get an email from me, I have a quote at the bottom of all my emails, and I'm going to close out today by sharing it with you. Your attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude. Your attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude. In other words, how high you're going to soar. Let me put it another way. Be the most positive person in the room and watch how that endears you to your boss and helps your career to soar. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. Big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.